The music, the raves, the festivals. Why is it so important? Why is it life-changing for so many people? How did the music change and influence our UK sound? The evolution of technology within music has created a major impact on our music culture. To get a deeper understanding, this will need to be looked at deep, not just in the UK, but internationally. The link between the US and Europe and how it influenced the UK's electronic music scene. A lot of history. We'll be jumping from nation to nation, from one genre to another. Remember, great things always come out of hardship. So with that, we need to go back in time.
This morning, the final note that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland. A state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now, this country is at war with Germany.
The fall of France was considered a major loss for the Allies, especially for the British nation. As German forces were near British waters, Nazi-occupied France was a major success for the German forces due to their blitzkrieg tactics. It would then lead to more further losses for us, such as the Dunkirk retreat, the Battle of Britain, and the Blitz. Back in France, citizens who felt like they were let down by the government for surrendering to the Nazis started to go against them. The French resistance. They were either fighters using violent guerrilla-style tactics, using planned attacks on German occupiers or affecting the German supply lines and communications. Then, there were the non-violent French resistance, publishing underground anti-Nazi propaganda and unauthorized broadcasting of radio programs to the Free France and French resistance. And this is where this story begins, with the prohibited radio broadcastings of World War II. In the past, sound technicians and engineers have always been innovating sound listening devices since the late 1800s. The development has always been a steady progress, with speakers, headphones and radio communications. Radio has been so important within France, as radio emulates a form of companionship and is able to put an emotional connection to the listeners. Hence why during World War II, radio was used to broadcast to the resistance from within France. And also, we were broadcasting to them here from London.
Ici, Londres. Les Français parlent aux Français.
An important person during this time that needs to be spoken about is Pierre Schaeffer. He was part of the resistance. He founded the Studio DSA, later known as Club DSA, a radio studio in Paris in 1942. This studio facility was used as the center of the French resistance movement in French radio, clandestinely working to free the airwaves. They would send secret coded messages through the radio to the French.
Amélie fait du vélo en short. Les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne bercent mon cœur d'une langueur monotone.
In a positive light, in 1944 was the liberation of France. Pierre's radio station had become responsible for being the first in broadcasts over liberated Paris.
Ici, radiodiffusion de la nation française.
On the other hand, Studio DSA was in conjunction with the University of Paris, and their main objectives for the station was to specialize in more experimental music and broadcast it to the listeners. This is where Pierre began his exploration within radiophonics and sound techniques. He would record sounds from the streets of Paris and from the station's sound library. He would assemble the sounds into his first piece in a somewhat abstract way. He introduced an important term, prélèvement, which means sample. When a sound is recorded, the sample can be manipulated in many ways. The goal was not to produce novel sounds, but to develop unique ways to produce novel sounds. A new genre was created, musique concrète, to create new sounds from existing sounds. On May 7th, 1945, Germany gave their unconditional formal surrender to the Soviets in the east and to the rest of the Allies to the west on May the 9th. Victory in Europe Day was proclaimed the 8th of May, which led to celebrations to all nations. Japan surrendered August 15th, 1945.
The last of our enemies is laid low. Peace has once again come to the world. Let us thank God for this great deliverance. Long live the King.
The tragic casualties of World War II had led to some 75 million people dead, including some 20 million military personnel and some 40 million civilians, many of whom had died from deliberate genocide, massacres, mass bombings, diseases, and starvation. Many were punished in trials for the war crimes they were either part of or that have committed them. The reason why I talk about World War II in this is because of remembrance and respect, and how it was such a huge turning point, not only within history of the lives lost, not only impacting all the world's economies, but it was the catalyst for the advancement in music, based on either war-related technology such as the magnetic tape, the morale of the nations during and post-war, and their opportunity to create a nation's new identity through music.
And don't say I'm a hero. I'm no hero. I was lucky. I'm here. All the heroes are dead, and I'll never forget them as long as I live. My generation saved the world, and I'll never forget any of them.
There was still a form of division, a division between the Soviets and other occupied nations on how to deal with Germany, such as their war debts. In the future would create the barrier known as the Iron Curtain, dividing East and West Germany. It is important to understand this, as this will be important for later on as a difference in relation to music.
Uns war das mehr ein Problem, überhaupt Musik machen zu können in einer Bundesrepublik oder so nach dem Krieg, wo die lebendige Musik, Alltagsmusik verschwunden war, die war ausgelöscht. Und unsere Generation, wir mussten halt wieder von vorne starten.
Bearing in mind, before the war, Germany was notable within the film industry and in music, already claimed some of the most notable classical musicians. In the 20th century, they had German Schlager, jazz and hot dance, which rose in popularity. But it was during the 1950s, German musical artists were also starting to experiment with music and technology. But regarding Germany, it will need to be explained more in depth on how their experimentation will impact the musical electronic world. But we'll go more deeper into it later on in the series. The 1960s was a time where electronic music began gaining its expansion, not only just within academia, but for independent musicians. The Radiophonic Workshop was important as they were one of the sound effect units of the BBC to produce incidental music for radio and TV. The Radiophonic Workshop is known for its work on music technology and the impact on electronic music. The 1963's Doctor Who theme was regarded as a significant and innovative piece of electronic music of the times. In the 1950s, there was a jazz festival on the grounds of Lord Montagu of Beaulieu. This was the first national jazz festival. Later on, as the jazz genre lost popularity, the festival introduced blues, rock, psychedelic rock, and many others through to the 60s. At the jazz festival, there was the freedom of alternative culture. This was where the festival seed was planted. In the 1960s, the hippie movement was growing big in the United States. Originally started from the Beat generation, they rejected consumerism and celebrated personal freedom, anti-conformist to society, protesting against the war in Vietnam.
There's a man with a gun.
On the other hand, here in the UK, we were experiencing the swinging 60s. But the number of British hippies was increasing, thus continuing spreading their peace of living message. The hippies went on the classic hippie trail, an alternative form of tourism, traveling to places like Nepal, Afghanistan, India, and Thailand. When returning to Britain, they wanted to challenge the values society imposed, issues on social inequality, and rampant materialism.
You don't need it.
Other people need it. The Vietnamese need it.
Nobody needs money. No, they need food and they need houses. They don't need money.
This radicalism created the birth of the idea of free festivals. Bring what you expect to get was their motto. Outdoor parties where people congregated, building friendships, playing music, and being free. In August 1968, the first Isle of Wight festival was held. Now this is important as this got the ball rolling for the festival scene, having more live performances, bringing big artists and bands such as Pretty Things, The Who, and even Bob Dylan from the States. Guarding the US 2 weeks before was the famous Woodstock Festival. Woodstock 69 will be considered a pivotal moment in popular music history. As the youth were expressing themselves in the US and the UK within the festivals, on the other hand, in Germany, the youth were expressing themselves through their own musical youth movement. Looking past not only American and British rock music, but also past German folk and Schlager music. The youth wanted to make something different. Keep in mind, during this time, cities such as Munich, Berlin, and many others were having student protests against the war of Vietnam, and to establish a sense of German cultural pride.
There were not too many ways for a German rock musician, to perform music, to develop music, even to think about the theoretical development of music, because there was no heritage.
Krautrock was born. Within these bands, they were experimenting, using electronic instruments such as synthesizers. While Britain and the US bands were playing rock, Germany was brewing a new sound. Their music was underground and started to bring electronic, minimalist, progressive rock, and this will grow to influence the musical world. In the next part, we'll look more in depth with the America connection, the civil rights movement, soul music, and its impact on the UK.